I was 8 when I first learned that love could be counted. It wasn't in a ledger or a bank statement. Those would come later. It was in a shoebox. My mother set 2 pairs on the rug, white leather sneakers for my sister, with glitter along the heel, and canvas trainers for me that squeaked when I bent the toe. "You're rough on shoes," she said to me without looking up. "These will last." When Layla twirled, the glitter caught light. When I twitched my foot, the rubber hissed. My mother kissed Layla's hair. She patted my head like I was a book she planned to shelve. The math of our family disguised itself as kindness. Lila was the dream, born after the company made its first real money. Born into a house with a pool and a kitchen island that made our old apartment look like a memory we shouldn't speak about. I was the rehearsal, born while my father still did his own deliveries, while my mother hosted investors on folding chairs dressed in tablecloths. They said I was strong. What they meant was I could carry weight they did not want to see. Layla loved easily and expected the world to reciprocate. She had a laugh that made strangers turn, and a way of asking for things that felt like offering you a chance to do the right thing. When she tripped, the earth lifted a palm. When I tripped, my knees bled, and then I learned to walk around that patch of sidewalk. We grew like mismatched vines against the same brick wall. On report card days, my A's earned nods and a question about the next one. Her B's earned dinner out and a toast to well-roundedness. When she decided ballet was her calling, my parents hired a teacher whose car cost more than my college fund. When I asked to join debate, my father said, "Arguing for sport? You already do that for free," and handed me a stack of dishes to dry. I didn't hate her. I invented games where she was the princess, and I engineered the castle. I learned to braid her hair and pin a bun tight enough that even cruel girls couldn't pull it loose. On nights my parents came home late from a board dinner, I'd slice apples and make cocoa and tell her stories about sisters who crossed forests together with only a flashlight and a pocket of candy. She believed me. I wanted to. By high school, I had discovered the quiet power of numbers. They were fair in a way life rarely was. If you worked the problem yielded. When I won a city math competition, my father shook my hand like I'd become an employee. "Useful," he told the room. When Layla was cast as a snowflake in her ballet recital, he brought roses large enough to hide her torso and told everyone she was his star. College separated us by train lines and languages. I took the cheapest dorm and the meal plan that left you full of salt. I learned to nap on a library bench with my backpack under my head. Layla lived in a house with girls who bought matching pajamas in October and monogrammed towels for the bathroom they never cleaned themselves. We texted photos, mine of lecture notes with fluorescent stripes, hers of rooftops and sunsets and mouths mid-laugh. When she cried because a professor told her that creative direction did not count as a coherent plan, I sent her a list of internships. When I cried because I got a 93 and not a 98 on a brutal exam, no one answered because I didn't send the message. The year I graduated, I took the first job that came with health insurance and an ID badge that made doors open. The office smelled like toner and ambition. I learned how to speak in bullet points, how to dress like authority without spending authority money, how to read footnotes like crime scenes. I liked it. I liked my small apartment that leaned toward the grocery store's neon sign, liked cooking eggs at midnight and eating them over the sink, liked listening to the upstairs couple break up and make up through a ceiling that pretended not to hear. Layla fell in love. He was called Ron, and he had a real estate grin, white, wide, and rarely surprised. He sent our mother flowers the size of furniture and called my father Sir, until the day my father told him to stop and he started calling him Vic. With the intimacy of a man who has practiced intimacy as a type of leverage, Layla glowed. She began sentences with we. She bought a journal for wedding ideas long before there was a ring, because Hope likes to shop. When the ring arrived, it arrived on a boat under fireworks and a photographer who had already selected filters for every platform. My parents' faces in the photos looked like the champagne had decided to stay. I got the invitation to the engagement party as a calendar block before the call. "Cocktail attire?" my mother chirped like we were talking about weather. "Don't be late. There's a seating chart." I was early. I'm always early. It's a habit you develop when late means you get what's left. The Carlton Hotel was a chandelier factory. Light dripped from ceilings and pooled on the polished floor. The air tasted like money with good manners. I wore a dress I found on a consignment rack and altered on my kitchen table. Little darts and hand stitches no one would ever notice except me. A planner in a headset mistook me for staff and handed me a box of place cards. I took them because there's a strange dignity in doing the thing that clearly needs doing. Guests came in bursts. Donors, developers. A woman from a magazine whose perfume entered 5 seconds before she did. The band in the corner played songs that made old. People feel young and young people feel curated. Ron's family arrived with coordinated smiles. Layla came last on Ron's arm in a dress like melted champagne. She saw me, opened her arms, and for a second we were children and the room was the hallway outside our bedrooms, where the carpet felt like a field. My father tapped his glass. The sound cut through laughter the way lightning explains itself to a storm. "Friends," he began, "tonight is not only a celebration of love, it is a commitment to future." He savored the last word, let it echo. A man in a navy suit stepped forward holding a ribbon-bound folder. The planner's hand twitched toward the lights, because she knew theater when she saw it. "We are gifting our daughter," my father said. $1.2 million. He paused like a pastor before the amen. "In pre-IPO shares of Hiratech." Pre-IPO is a spell. It turns paper into prophecy. The room applauded like someone had donated a hospital wing, which, in a way, my parents were doing, except the wing had a single bed and my name wasn't on the paperwork. Layla gasped beautifully. Ron squeezed her waist and whispered something that made her eyes shine. My mother blotted the corner of her mouth. I stood very still because motion felt like agreeing to gravity. My phone buzzed. It was my mother. "Don't make a scene. This is your sister's night." The message landed with the weight of a lifetime. Not the words themselves. I'd heard variants for years, but the presumption that I was a problem to be managed, a potential stain on the white tablecloth. Not a daughter, not a witness, not a person capable of feeling pride for her sister, while feeling something else for herself. A scene to my mother meant any emotion that could not be framed. I smiled for the photographs. I hugged Layla when she rushed me, breathless. "Can you believe it?" she asked, and I said yes because I could. The math had always been true. The announcement simply added commas. I slept badly. At 3 a.m., I made tea and opened my laptop because the only antidote I trust for humiliation is work. Gifts like that don't walk through doors without paperwork. They arrive in vehicles named like something you swallow with water. Grats, FLPs, QSBS if you're lucky, and laws are your friends. They borrow the language of family, trusts, beneficiaries, and apply it with the precision of a surgeon who doesn't like patience. By dawn, I had a map. A holding company formed 3 weeks ago, an asset purchase from my father's trust at a valuation, so conservative it wore a sweater, a distribution to a beneficiary whose initials matched the ones on Layla's passport. Everything legal, everything polished, everything obvious if you were the kind of girl who had taught herself to read behind the lines, because the lines were never written for her. It wasn't the money. If you could measure resentment, mine rarely converts to dollars. It was the message. We believe in one future so loudly we brought a lawyer to announce it. We believe in the other future so quietly we whisper about resilience. Sunlight made my kitchen dishonest. The cheap tile glowed like something expensive briefly visiting. I wanted to call someone. I didn't. I wanted to run. I made eggs. People like me survive because we choose the small thing we can do when the big thing is laughing. The next weeks became a hallway of events, tastings, fittings, a brunch where a woman with a binder explained that Layla was a romantic minimalist, and then opened a page full of flowers. I came early, stacked boxes, pressed stickers onto bathroom baskets. I was thanked the way people thank coat racks. My mother told woman after woman that I was so reliable, and told me under her breath not to wear black because it absorbed the light. My father, on a day when the room smelled like peonies and money, clapped my shoulder and said, "We poured into Layla because she needs a springboard. You're already on the dock." I nodded because rooms like that punish disagreement. But part of me, Tired, mean, honest, pictured his hand slipping on wet wood. Layla came to my apartment with grocery store cupcakes and a face that couldn't decide between apology and hope. We sat on my couch, two women who used to share a bunk bed trying to share air. "I didn't know about the shares," she said without preamble. "They told me 5 minutes before." "I didn't ask for it, Arya." "I know," I said, and I did. The theater wasn't hers. She just played the role they cast. "I told them to do something for you too," she said. "They said they will. Maybe not the same, but, you know." "But?" I asked gently because harshness would turn her into my mother for the night and I would lose her. She twisted the cupcake wrapper until it separated into petals. "Dad said you don't need help. He said you made yourself." "That's not affection," I said. "That's abdication." She blinked fast. I want my wedding to be happy." "Then make it about you and Ron," I said, keeping my voice flat enough to stack books on. "Not a portfolio." She tried to smile. It almost worked. "You'll be there?" "I'll be there," I said. "And I won't make a scene." She exhaled like I'd untied a knot in her stomach. We watched television that made no demands. When she left, she hugged me so hard I smelled her shampoo until morning. I went back to the numbers. The foundation appeared like a conjurer's flourish. Hale Warren Future Fund. Photos of children gazing toward light filtered through trees. Mission statements written by people who have never been told no by a lunch lady. The filing address matched the holding companies. The privacy policy listed a vendor with a history of rounding, small donations into operational pools, a page, half built, cached, listed. Our inaugural scholars, 2 kids. I mentored whose applications weren't open yet. Their faces were used as a promise written in pencil. I printed nothing. I told no one. I kept a folder with a name that, if read quickly, looked like a grocery list. On lunch breaks, I walked down to the river and watched the water pretend to be a mirror and thought about how much of my life I had spent making myself useful to people who would never realize the difference between utility and love. When I finally called someone, it wasn't to complain. I called Nisha, who works where paperwork goes when it thinks it can wear a mask. And I asked her 3 questions. What counts as a fair valuation? How does a bureau prioritize complaints? And where does the line live between legal and wrong? She laughed once, the kind laugh between women, who learned to be brave without instruction, and said, "You already know the answers. You called to hear yourself say them out loud." She was right. I wanted my voice to know I would use it. The wedding was a cathedral with flowers. The kind of day that makes photographers consider abandoning their families to move here and devote their lives to documenting other people's vows. Layla looked impossible and true. Ron looked like a man who expected ceilings to open for him. I adjusted my dress, smoothed my hair, and told myself to be a bridge for the night, because rivers don't owe anyone explanations. The planner handed out small tent cards with a QR code. "Scan to learn more about our foundation," she chirped. Every gift matched, every dollar a seed. She had no idea what those words do to people who grew up with mothers who turned leftovers into soup and called it a feast. A week earlier, when she left the box of cards in an unlocked office, I had replaced a handful. The same design, the same weight of paper, the same logo like a kiss on the corner. But my code led to a page Lena built for me, one that mirrored the foundation site almost perfectly, and then, like a good friend at 3 a.m., told the truth gently, the filing address match, the vendor's history, the premature scholars list, 3 bullet points, 3 dates, no adjectives, a link to official records, a line at the top, before you give, know where it goes. It wasn't sabotage. It was a light switch. The reception hummed. We ate, we clinked. We listened to toasts that served the function of weather, making everyone feel part of something they didn't choose. My father rose to speak, his voice smooth as a good pen. He said future 3 times and journey twice and integrity once. He gestured toward the cards. People lifted their phones. The room doesn't gasp all at once. It shifts, it hums, it exchanges glances like contraband. Someone muttered, "Is this the real site?" Someone else said, "It's a mirror. See the footer?" A donor with careful hair took off his glasses and cleaned. them as if clarity lived in the lenses. A comms girl whose lipstick matched the napkins ran for a laptop. My mother's smile thinned the way ice thins before spring decides. Ron's aunt leaned toward him and said something that tasted like metal. My father kept speaking because he'd learned long ago that silence is a currency and he refused to spend it. I went to the hallway with the framed photos of dead founders. The carpet ate the sound of my shoes. I did not cry. My heart didn't pound. I had used up my adrenaline on smaller battles long ago. I breathed the way people breathe when they're hiding in bathroom stalls and need to leave without letting anyone know they were there. Layla found me. Her face was beautiful and wet. She stared at me like I was a painting that might reveal itself if she tilted her head. "You promised," she said softly. "I promised not to object," I said. And I didn't. I took her hand and took a breath I could have used for running. "I love you. I will love you tomorrow, but I won't let them use my quiet as mortar." "I wanted it to be perfect," she whispered. "It is," I said, and meant it in a way that startled me. "Not the perfection you were sold. The kind where the truth is invited in and sits down even if it didn't wear the right dress." She swallowed. "You always were the brave one," she said. "I just don't like how it looks on camera." We laughed then, because there was nothing else left to do in that hallway, where 100 men's portraits pretended to approve. The night didn't explode, it sagged. The band played harder, as if volume could reconstruct momentum. People danced because they had put on shoes that required a dance floor to justify. The planner smiled like her face owed the room money. I sat with an old aunt who held my hand and told me about a time in the village when a woman returned a goat because the goat had been stolen and the whole town still ate biryani. "We made a better goat," she said, patting my fingers with papery palms. That's what this felt like. I loved her for it so much I wanted to write her name on the wall. And in the morning, the city looked the same and not at all, which is how change behaves when it respects your intelligence. I didn't get the shares. I didn't get the ribbon-bound blessing or the applause. I got a story that didn't need a stage to be true. I got a switch and the knowledge of where the wall is in rooms, where the lights are always set too low. I still hear my mother sometimes, "Don't make a scene," and I still don't. I make a record. I make a question. I make a mirror and I hold it at an angle that doesn't flatter anyone, including me. And when strangers ask what it felt like to stand in a room where your future was divided with a lawyer's smile, I tell them about the shoes, the glitter that caught the light, the squeak of canvas, the math I learned on a rug when I was 8, and the sum I refuse to accept as an adult, that love is a ledger and someone else gets to keep the pen. No, not anymore. I keep my own pen. I write my own ledger. And when they pass around the shoebox, I count out loud. The days after the wedding were strangely quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels like peace, but the kind that hums in the walls before something cracks. My parents didn't mention the incident with the QR codes. Not once, not directly. But the silence itself was a language, and I was fluent in it. My father asked about work, sliding the question across the table like a glass of water he hoped I wouldn't drink. My mother sent recipes she'd clipped from glossy magazines, as if feeding me secondhand could undo the taste of being forgotten. I didn't answer much. Instead, I kept moving forward, because sometimes the only revenge you get is refusing to stop. The investigation deepens. I hadn't intended to become an investigator, but once you've pulled one thread, your hands itch for the rest. At the office, between balance sheets and client calls, I dug deeper. I mapped the foundation's vendor network. I traced shell companies like constellations across states. I found invoices that looked like riddles, consulting, fees for services never rendered, donations in kind that were really discounts disguised as generosity. Nisha met me one evening at a diner that smelled like frying, oil and late-night confessions. She sipped her coffee, flipping through the documents I'd printed on the office copier. "This is worse than you think," she said flatly. "How much worse?" "Enough that if a regulator gets hold of it, someone's writing a check with more zeros than your parents want to see." She tapped her nail on a line item. "This isn't just favoritism. It's valuation fraud. They underpriced shares to avoid taxes, then washed the transfer through a foundation for optics. If they get caught—" "They won't," I finished. They're too careful. She looked at me sharp. Then you need to be careful too. You've already painted a target on your back. I laughed without humor. I've been a target my whole life. They just called it responsibility. Layla called me late one night, her voice fragile. I can't sleep, she admitted. Ron says everyone's overreacting. He says the donors just got cold feet. And what do you think? I asked. I think you ruined my wedding, she whispered. The words hit harder than I expected. Layla. I know you think you were protecting me, she cut in. But all I wanted was one night. Just one, without drama, without numbers, without being reminded that everything we have is tainted. Her breath hitched. You were supposed to be my sister, not my auditor. I closed my eyes. I am your sister. That's why I couldn't stay silent. Silence would have been betrayal. She hung up. For days, her absence echoed louder than my parents' silence. The wedding fallout. The foundation's pause stretched into weeks. Donors quietly withdrew pledges. Ron's aunt resigned, citing health reasons. Rumors spread in boardrooms, always in the careful tone of people who fear lawsuits. My father tried to spin it as strategy. We're restructuring, he told a journalist at a gala, smiling with all his teeth. But the headline the next day read, Questions Cloud Hale Warren Foundation. At work, I received a promotion offer, higher title, better pay. My manager said it was for outstanding forensic work. But I knew the truth. My reputation for uncovering what others wanted hidden had reached places my father's influence couldn't touch. The quiet revenge. One evening, Lena came to my apartment with a folder thick as a brick. Everything you gave me, she said. Cross-checked, verified, footnoted. If you want, I can publish. I stared at the folder. Publishing meant headlines. Headlines meant spectacle, a scene. No, I said finally. Not yet. Then what do you want? Proportion, I whispered. She studied me, then nodded. Then we wait. And when the moment comes, we make sure they can't bury it. I stared at the folder. Publishing meant headlines. Headlines meant spectacle, a scene, the family brunch. My mother invited me to brunch again. This time, she chose a garden cafe where the air smelled like roses and expensive promises. She held her teacup like it might break. Why do you always have to be so difficult? She asked quietly. Because someone has to be, I replied. Her eyes flickered. We didn't mean to hurt you. You've always been so capable. You don't need the same kind of gestures. Gestures, I repeated bitterly. Is that what 1.2 matter is? A gesture? Her lip trembled, but she didn't answer. For the first time, I realized she wasn't cruel. She was complicit. And maybe that was worse. Ron's warning. Ron cornered me at another event, his jaw tight. You need to stop digging, he said. Or what? Or you'll regret it. I smiled coldly. I've regretted worse. The long aftermath. Months turned into a year. The foundation relaunched, smaller, humbler. This time applications were real. The first class of scholars included 2 of the kids I'd mentored at the library. Layla sent me their photos with crying emojis. My parents never apologized. They never admitted wrongdoing. But they changed in small ways. No more ribbon-bound announcements. No more public blessings disguised as investments. They moved quieter, as if afraid of echoes. Layla and I rebuilt slowly. She invited me for coffee one morning, placing her hand over mine. I'm still angry, she admitted. But I also understand now. I needed to grow up. You just forced it sooner. I squeezed her hand. That's what sisters do. Epilogue. Years later, I stood at another gala, this one honoring the very foundation that once nearly collapsed. The scholars on stage were real this time. Their stories weren't stolen. Their futures weren't bought. My parents sat in the front row, their faces older, quieter. Layla spoke at the podium, her voice steady. She thanked me by name, publicly, for the first time. My chest tightened. It wasn't 1.2 or in shares. It wasn't a gesture. It was something rarer, acknowledgement. And as the applause filled the room, I heard my mother's words again, don't make a scene. I smiled, because I hadn't. I'd made a standard,